Hello, dear friends. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're watching us. Have a good rest of your day. I'm Daniel Kamarov. Welcome to my podcast on YouTube. We continue our meetings with outstanding leaders under the rubric of keeping the faith. My guests shared their thoughts and wisdom about the role of religion and faith in the life of a modern person and about the importance of interfaith communication and mutual assistance. The link to these interviews are in the comment below. Please react to the podcast, like, subscribe, share. All reactions are welcome. Today, we meet with a first-class expert in the history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the rector of Ben-Gurion University, historian Professor Chaim. His research interests are varied, ranging from medieval and Renaissance Jewish, Christian, and Muslim mysticism and philosophy, apocalypticism, interreligious polemics, Bible and Talmud translations, and issues dealing with religious conversions. Dear Chaim, thank you for the wonderful opportunity to learn from you. I have various questions for you as a scholar historian, as a rector of a university, and as an Israeli.
Thank you, Daniel. Good morning. It's great to be with you, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. In the first book of the Torah, Genesis, it is said that Adam and Eve were expelled from paradise because they ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Somehow, knowledge is not always good. It is written in the book of the Torah, honor your mother and father, do not commit murder. In what cases is it better to explore, study, and in which cases is it better to just blindly follow a commandment, rule, or canon?
So you start with one of the most difficult questions, and one that could probably fill this whole podcast. It's or this whole interview, this whole discussion. Um, let's think a little about paradise, okay? Before we go into the question of good and evil, okay? If so, the book of Genesis tells us that God creates the world in 7 days, okay? And one of the places created is paradise, and that's where God puts Adam and Eve, right? The primeval, according to the Bible, the primeval humans. And he tells them that they can roam around the garden, do whatever they like, but they're not allowed to eat from two trees. Okay, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Let's think about that for a sec. Okay, if God is the perfect good, God is perfection, then paradise is perfection. If paradise is perfection, okay, there are no need for any rules and regulations there because everything is perfect. However, right, perfection goes against human nature. Okay, but Adam and Eve, when they're in paradise, are perfect because they don't know anything else. Okay, so when supposedly the snake, according to the story, right, the snake tempts Eve, and it had to be Eve, right, because right, it had to be the woman has to be the one who falls into the trap, at least according to the men who wrote the Bible, or who wrote the biblical text. So when Eve is tempted, right, to eat from the tree, and then she takes the fruit, whatever it may have been, and gives it to Adam, right? That's when perfection disappears, right? And good and evil, time, history begins. Okay? Human nature takes over from the divine perfection. And therefore, Adam and Eve had to leave paradise, had to leave Gan Eden, right? The Garden of Eden, because they could no longer exist in that divine perfection that existed previous to their eating the tree. It's interesting that according to the story, God puts the tree there, right? Because God knows, I guess, right, that there was no reason to create the world if it was going to remain in perfection, because if perfection is a state of being, then it seems to me, even for God, it would be pretty boring. Okay, so the tree had to be there. They chose the tree of good and not good and evil rather than the tree of right, the tree of life and death, right? But as soon as they exit the Garden of Eden, right, it's both good and evil and life and death because that's the way we live. That's the way we live in this world. So eating the fruit really symbolizes the beginning of time, the beginning of history, human nature, and the need to begin to form societies. Okay, now you asked about in your question, right? You asked about commandments, right, and rules and knowledge. Okay, so human survival is based on knowledge. Okay, as we know, right? Science, knowledge, right? Without science, without knowledge, without progress, without thought, right? Human beings can't really exist. But as we've seen, right, knowledge can be used in throughout history. We've seen that knowledge can be used in for good purposes and for evil purposes, right? Which is why the tree is called the tree of good and evil. Right? Knowledge can be used in many different ways. Okay, so rules and regulations, right? Commandments, rules and regulations are part of a social contract, right? They're part of what allow us to live together in a society, right, where we all know or we all agree or there is some sort of social contract which says how we're going to live together, right? What we will do, what we won't do, right? We shouldn't murder, right? We shouldn't steal, right? We should respect, we should honor our father and mother. Right? That's the framework that allows society, right, to develop, allows humans, right, to live together. And people who don't obey those rules need, right, are basically taking themselves or outside of the social contract. And if society wants to survive, right, it has to punish, right, in some way, right, or educate, or at least try and help these people come back, right, and respect the social contract. Right, but we've seen that even there, right, rules and regulations can be used in evil ways, okay, or can be used in ways that have a negative result. I mean, you came and to live in Israel a couple of years ago. You've been here through a very traumatic period, and we've seen right before October the 7th, right, we've seen how a government that's set on increasing its own power at the expense of its of citizens, right, is breaking, in a sense, the social contract and using rules and regulations for what I would call, I won't say evil, right, but using them for bad, right, for bad purposes. So rules and regulations are really important, but they have nothing really to do with study and knowledge. Right? Study and knowledge can create reasons for new rules and regulations, but knowledge and study are for their own right, are part and parcel of being human, and without them, we can't really survive.
Thank you so much, and it is really interesting, and I haven't really thought of the tree of knowledge and the eating the fruit as a beginning of maybe separation of divine and human and the beginning of building the social construct. It is really interesting. The My second question is that your family immigrated from Israel to the UK when you were a child,
The other way
and
around.
yes, and you attended a religious school and the yeshiva. Some time ago, you even wanted to become a rabbi. How did you choose the path of academic knowledge, and how did you become a scholar historian?
Well, I grew up as you said, I was born in England, and my parents decided to make Aliyah when I was a child. And my parents grew up, my parents are from an modern Orthodox background. So when they moved to Israel, they sent us, as was then customary, they sent their children to yeshiva tichonit, which is a yeshiva high school where you spend just over half the day studying Talmud and what's called limudei kodesh, right? Religious studies. Okay, and the afternoon you study what's called limudei chol, which is secular, right? Secular studies. So you get around a rounded education. I spent most of my time there reading. I was a voracious reader, and I really enjoyed. And in fact, some of my friends who remember me from way back then, one of their most vivid memories of me lying on my bed in the dormitory, reading books. I didn't only read books, but I did read a lot of books. As I grew older, and after I did the my military service, as we have to do here, I knew that I wanted to study history. I don't know why I knew that I wanted to study history, but I knew that I wanted to study history, and I really discovered, I think, while I was studying history, that I was drawn to study in greater depth religions. Okay? And as you said, at the time, I there was a time when I thought of becoming a rabbi. But, and perhaps we can talk about this later, I came to the realization that the last thing Israel needed was another rabbi. And it doesn't matter from which stream, whether it be Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, name it, whatever. The last thing Israel needs is a rabbi because rabbis are the diasporic leaders. In other words, rabbis exist or were created in a sense, of the rabbinical idea formed in order to allow Jewish communities to exist in exile. And in Israel, we're no longer in exile. And here we need to think about new sorts of religious leadership, new sorts of ways of expressing our Judaism. So I decided not to become a rabbi and instead devote much of my life to studying religions, but historically.
Really interesting, and I think that studying history and studying religious history is a very interesting aspect of science, and it is I personally love it, and I like to study it in my free time. In one interview, you said that you were fascinated by how ideas move back and forth between cultures and religion, and you were interested in relationship between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I'd like to ask you about how the texts in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam became sacred or canonical, and how these religions influence to each other in it.
Okay, now you've asked me to try and sum up about 40 years or 30 years of research in a minute and a half. Okay, but I will try and do my best. And for us for our sakes, for this purpose at this moment, I'm going to put Islam aside. Okay, you'll understand why in a moment. Okay, and I'm going to say something a little provocative, but it's something that perhaps needs to be thought about a lot more. But I'm going to start by saying, as I said, provocative, that the Bible isn't a Jewish text. Okay, what do I mean by that? I'm not saying that the Bible isn't important for Judaism. The Bible is crucial for Judaism, but it's also crucial for Christianity. Okay, and both of these religions emerge from within the biblical context, or what we might be able to say as the temple cult. Okay, so the temple, right, the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, okay, by the Romans, right? But both Judaism and Christianity emerge from within that context, right? The temple context, and the temple context is not Jewish. Okay, if you look very closely throughout the Bible and right the post-biblical works, you won't find rabbis. The rabbis aren't mentioned in the Bible, right? You have different types of leadership in in the Bible, but there are no rabbis, there are no priests, there are priests, right? The priests in the temple, but there are no clergy, Christian clergy. Okay, or you won't find clergy either, right? So both Judaism and Christianity emerge, and I should perhaps say something slightly different. Judaisms and Christianities, okay, emerge as a reaction to changing historical circumstances and particularly the destruction of the temple. Okay, now both Jewish and Christian canonical texts emerge, or the texts themselves become canonized when there is a need within these emerging groups to solidify or at least create a basis, right, for their religious revolution. Because both Judaism and Christianity, or Judaisms and Christianity, are a radical reinterpretation, right, of the biblical text. Okay, and they both use the biblical text, right? And they're almost exactly the same biblical text, except that one is in Hebrew, the other is in a Greek translation, okay, which then was translated into Latin and into other languages. But right, they both use basically the same text, and on its basis, create new religious leadership, create new authority, and through that begin to reinterpret reality in order to make it relevant to the lives of the people living living in those times. Okay, so I think it's something that I know it's a little provocative, and I don't mean to. The Bible is, of course, Jewish, right? In the sense that it's without it, Judaism makes absolutely no sense. Okay, but Judaism is a revolutionary interpretation as a result of the loss of the destruction of the temple and the loss of political power.
I see. So, in a way, the uh, both Christianity and or Christianities and Judaisms were caused by different events, but are both based on the Bible. Is yes? And
Yeah. So,
what about
okay.
yes?
No, so
And
just to say, just for example, so Christians, right, interpreted the coming of Jesus, for example, as being the beginning of what they defined as messianic times. Okay, they saw Jesus as a Messiah figure. Okay, whereas the rabbis, as they were thinking about, thought about it very differently. They thought about the destruction of the temple, exile. The Messiah will be someone who'll come in the future. So already there's the beginning of a different interpretation of reality, but they both emerge from within the same context.
and so what about Islam? How did Islam come into the picture?
Okay, so is Islam, right, as you perhaps now understand, Islam already emerges into religions which are based on texts. It already emerges in a time, right, in the seventh century, okay, where both Judaism and Christianity are religions which are based on canonical texts. Okay, so and what we see is that Islam very quickly coalesces as well around a religious text. Okay, you have Muhammad, right? And Muhammad comes and reveals the Quran, right? But within a generation or two of Muhammad, you already have the Quran, which then becomes the book around which Islam is founded. Okay, so Islam is already founded in a very different historical context. Judaism and Christianity, right, are religions that move from space, physical space, temple, okay, a temple, to text. Okay, and texts think about it for a second. In the temple, texts are not important. Ritual is important. Okay, in the temple you have priests who basically are in control and they control the access to the God, to God. Okay, the priests are the mediators between man and God, right? They look after the supposedly holy texts, but the texts are not texts which are read, which define the religion. the ritual defines the religious praxis and the way man and God, interact. Okay? And the big change in both Judaism and Christianity, and then Islam, as in is the movement from the temple, from the physical place, from the place where God lives, right, where God dwells, and where you come to encounter God, to the text. Right, the text becomes the place where we go to encounter, interpret, understand, try and live according to what the way God wants us to live. So Islam already emerges into a world where texts are the place where you go to encounter God. So Muhammad reveals the Quran, right? He reveals a text. Okay, Moses doesn't reveal a text.
Right.
Okay, Jesus doesn't reveal a text. Okay, those texts are written down later. Muhammad reveals the Quran because the text is where you go to encounter God.
I see. So, in a way, Judaism, Christianity were based on a physical place, and then where we as Jews and Christians, when we kind of lose the place, we change it onto the book. And as I understand, the Islam wasn't based on a place more than they started with a book, in a way.
That's correct. Although a small correction, Judaism and Christianity emerge, right, from within that temple context, from the
Mm.
place, in the movement from the place to text. Okay, Judaism and Christianity can emerge as religions of the book, and that's why they're known as religions, right, as religions of the book. Okay, in the temple, they weren't religions of books.
Right,
Okay,
right,
because they
right,
didn't because and Islam is one of the religions of the book because it is based around a book.
right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. And so, as we're already talking about canonical and non-canonical texts, how valuable are non-canonical texts for the three religions and for scientific studies?
When you say non-canonical text, what do you mean by that?
I mean the texts that are maybe that are accepted as in the three religions, but that are, for example, as the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found them later, and we didn't kind of understand what they were, and we didn't take them into account when the religions were formed. And now that we found them, how is it changing the religion, and how is it changing this for the scientific study?
Okay, so religions, okay, develop in historical context. So every text, right, tells if we're able to determine when it was written, who wrote it, right, gives us insight as to the mindset of the person who wrote it, or the people who compiled the text, and right, the context in which they live. So the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls incredibly enriched our understanding, right, of how both Judaism and Christianity emerged from within the temple, right, the temple cult. Okay, so any text in any time, right, is really, really, really interesting. And I'm talking now as a historian, right, as a historian of religions, right. Any text, right, gives me as a historian insight if I know who the author was and I can place him in a particular context. I know and I can learn more, right, about the context. It gives me another way of understanding, seeing, explaining, right, the richness of the intellectual life at the time, but also, right, how, right, it's like building blocks, right, how religion develops according to changing historical circumstances and contexts. So for me as a historian, almost any text, right, is fascinating, right. There are texts which are very boring, okay, but normally, by the way, boring text didn't survive. Even in text there's a survival of the fittest, right? Sometimes it's because of accidents, right? Because don't forget, before printing, manuscripts, right? If people copied the manuscript, it survived, right? Or had better chance of survival. If the manuscript wasn't copied and it was a unique copy, if there was a fire in the library, like in Alexandria, hey, right? Sadly, we're not going to have that text unless it was cited by someone else whose text did survive. So even in text, there's also the survival of the fittest, right? Although not always, it's not always biological. It's more an issue of who copied the text, was it copied, where was it kept. So texts are a fascinating window onto human development, knowledge, as we've talked about before, how things connect with each other, and how, in my case, how religions develop.
Thank you so much. That is, I'm didn't I understood it on a subconscious level that the texts were not copied, but I guess it is really great that with the development of copying machines and in Europe and it is great that now we get more chance to maybe save the scriptures and the texts that were written a long time ago.
Yeah,
And
but but
so,
but
yes,
Daniel, I have to say that the printing press was an amazing revolution. Okay, because it also gave access to many more people. Right, text became more accessible to many more people. But manuscripts are absolutely fascinating because when you copy a manuscript, okay, you ask yourself, you have to, right, and then you can't print it, so you have to copy it by hand. So you have to invest a lot of time, effort, and money because parchment before paper, and then paper, right, are not cheap. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, why is the person copying you? Why is it so interesting? And then you discover that the copyist adds all sorts of things in the text. Right? The text is not the same as the original. By the way, the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? In the Dead Sea Scrolls, we see that the biblical text uh, wasn't canonized. Right? There are 19 different versions of the Book of Deuteronomy in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, and they're not different. There's not a word here, a word there. It's literally they're very different. Okay, so the text wasn't fixed yet. Okay, and that raises lots of interesting questions. Why was Deuteronomy, or why was that order of the text important for this author, but not for that author? Who decided the order of the text? Fascinating stuff that, which, as the picture behind you shows, right? So many books have been written about this, and it's fascinating.
right. It is in a way something that is also in the Torah, in the Bereshit. 1:1 and 1:2 are two different uh, stories of how the world was created. So
Correct.
that is really interesting.
Yeah, and someone decided, someone or some or a group of people decided, the editors, right, decided to put those two versions together and bring about thousands of years, over 1,500 years of commentaries to explain how those two texts are not contradictory, which, if you read them carefully, they clearly are.
They definitely look that, yes. So I love smart jokes, and let me share one with you. A rabbi died and went to heaven and asked God, Lord, tell me, how did you create the universe? Well, singularity, the Big Bang, exponential expansion. Physicists understood everything correctly. Okay, and how did you create all living creatures? Well, first abiogenesis, the RNA, the evolution, cells, single-celled organisms evolved into multicellular organisms. Okay, and well, how did you create a man? Listen, Darwin described this. First primates, then the use of tools, speech, walking upright. Did you skip your school? But God, in the Torah, it is written about the 7 days of creation, about the creation of man. Listen, and how would you, Rabbi, if you were there on Mount Sinai then, How would you explain to illiterate shepherds with bronze swords about quark-gluon plasma, DNA, and natural selection? Of course, this joke is about conversation between a rabbi and God. Modern understanding of God is formed under the influence of the Bible that was for centuries passed down from generation to generation. What areas of historical research of the Bible are of particular interest in our time?
Oh, I think everything is of interest. For example, let's talk about your what you said before that just a moment ago after that lovely joke, right? About our concept of God is based on what's written in the Bible. Okay,
Yes,
Is the Bible a monotheistic text?
I would think so.
Okay, so let's take that one stage further. Look at the Ten Commandments. Okay, probably the most as we talked about Sinai before, you mentioned God, right? The rabbi, right? God talks about giving the Torah on Mount Sinai. The Ten Commandments. How do they begin? I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Right? That's the first verse. Interesting, by the way, that God doesn't say, I am the God who created the world. Okay, that comes further on. Okay, he talks first. He says, God CV, I'm the one who took you out of the land of Egypt. It just happened, right? So I took you out of the land. And what's the next verse? Thou shalt have no other gods aside from me. What does that mean?
Probably that it is implementing that there are other gods, but I'm your God.
Exactly. Monotheism is an idea, right? Monotheism. There is only one God. Okay, the biblical text itself tells us in the Ten Commandments, and again, it's before we go to all the commentaries, which of course, the commentaries are written already in a world where monotheism is was more or less right accepted, and therefore they read the text as a monotheistic text. But when you read those first two, that first commandment, and you should have no, there should have no other gods but me. The world is full of gods. It's full of divine beings, right? The idea of monotheism, by the way, it's a Greek word. Okay, they didn't know Greek, so the concept of one God would have been incredibly weird, right? For the authors of that text or God, whoever want, or the God who gave that text, right? So today, the Bible is a living text. Okay, so today we read that text, and for over 1,000 years, that text has been read as a monotheistic text. Okay, but when you look at we look at the Bible today, okay, when we use the tools that we have, the philological and other tools that we have to read the biblical text and keep it as a living text, we realize that it's much more complex. Okay, the temple, right? Both temples, right? The first temple and the second temple existed in a world of polytheism, right? The Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon of gods afterwards. You have in the whole way across the Mesopotamia, right, and the Near East are full of gods. Okay, what makes, by the way, the temple unique? But it's not really unique because there's another temple in Elephantine, right, in Egypt. Okay, to the same God that's being worshipped in the temple in Jerusalem, right? So even that God has multiple temples where you can go and right, where you can go and worship him, it, her, whatever. Okay, so makes it far more interesting. I always go back to the fact that I always think about Elohim. Okay, the word Elohim. We don't think about it as being plural, but it's plural. It means gods.
Right?
Okay, not God, right? Of course, we read it today as singular, okay, because that's the way we've been taught to read the Bible, okay? But Elohim is a plural word. Eloha is one God, right? Or El is a Elohim, plural ending, okay? So again, many things, it makes the Bible a living a text and makes it fascinating to reread, and read again and again and again, and read it through the eyes of the commentators in the Middle Ages and modern period. But then again, add your own layers of interpretation because, right, I read the Bible, and for me, it's a very important text, and it informs the way I think about my life today. But it also allows me to it enriches it allows me to go in almost any direction that I would like to take in. That's what's fascinating about the biblical text.
That is great, and that is eye-opening to me personally because I never understood the text of the Bible as in I am one true God, but it doesn't truly say one. I am the one true God. It says I'm your one true God,
Correct?
not that there is no other concepts of other gods. There is a funny expression: only a mouse absorbs the book from textually from cover to cover. To what extent is a mediator, a priest, a rabbi, an imam needed in each of the three religions to select what can be read by ordinary people, by congregants, and who can correctly interpret canonical books for their congregants?
Hmm. So again, this is something that has to be looked at historically, okay? And brings us perhaps to a more basic question about what is religion. Okay, now we could spend a long, long time on that question. So I'll just give you my take. Okay, I think religion has very little to do with God. I think religion has a lot to do with rules and regulations as to how to live your life and how to create frameworks for communities to exist in together and coalesce around certain ethical and moral beliefs. And it's a method of control. Okay? And the control is given to or taken by leaders, right, who over the generations develop the mechanisms which give them that control over the lives of their followers. Okay, and whether it be imams or rabbis or priests, right? And again, I'm not saying that all of them are doing it. Many of these leaders are leaders who believe with all their hearts and souls, right, that they know how to interpret the will of God. They know the best ways of explaining what is written in the. And again, I'm not being cynical, right? I think many of them really, truly, and sincerely, right, believe that they are the best mediators between man and God, and they can best explain to us, right, what God wants from us and how God wants us to live our lives. Okay, but that's the way religion develops, and that's the way religion has, and that's why people choose, or often don't choose. They're often born into, right? A certain religious tradition, and they're brought up on that religious tradition and on the and they're taught right from birth as to who they're supposed to listen to, who's supposed to tell them what to do and how to do and how to live their lives. And if they want to be part of the community, then they have to accept upon themselves those norms, right, which are part of that, or part of being part of the religious community. So, and again, no cynicism implied, because I think religion has done an incredible amount of good, right, in developing knowledge, science in human society. I think it's also done a lot of evil, going back to where we started our conversation. But I think there's been an enormous amount of it's contributed enormously to the development of and evolvement of human thought, belief, society, community, politics, whatever. But I think in essence, religion, right, or religious leaders, right, are part of a mechanism, right, that allows us to create a sense of belonging, a sense of being, community, right, and in a sense, we allow or we give those leaders right? Permission to interpret for us and tell us how we should live our lives. Right? Now, what happens when people begin to question those frameworks? Right? You get someone like me, right, who is slightly more right, or perhaps like you, right, who questions things and is interested as perhaps looking more at the meta, right, the meta of religion rather than the nitty-gritty little details, which are right so important if you want to keep control and you want to people to live in a certain way and listen to you. So there are many issues that can be right that can be dealt with within this context. I hope I've begun to answer your question.
Definitely. And I want to follow up with another question. Christianity and Islam have made great efforts to convert Jews into their religion, and Judaism is not a missionary religion because one can only become Jewish by being born to a Jewish mother or by converting. Don't you think Judaism should be at least a little bit more friendlier to those who would like to join the Jewish people?
Well, I think again, historical context defined how Judaism developed in relationship, particularly to Christianity, and then afterwards Islam, and the way Christianities, okay, developed, okay, meant that it was more of a missionary religion, and because it became the religion of empire, in a sense, Judaism became more enclosed, right? And Judaism had to build, in order to survive, Judaism and the rabbis had to build, had to construct walls. Perhaps walls is not the right word, but to make it more difficult, right, to enter, right, within the to Judaism. And I think that's why Judaism developed as a less of a missionary religion than both Christianity and Islam. But again, I think there are Judaisms today and not Judaism. Okay, and if you look around today, there are many ways of becoming Jewish. Okay, now it might be more difficult to become Jewish in an Orthodox setting, but if you really want to become part of the Jewish people, there are other ways, right, of joining, right, the Jewish nation, right? There's reform and conservative conversion, which I don't think are any less, if you're doing it for the right reasons, are any less kosher. Let's put it like that, right? Then Orthodoxy, I don't think Orthodoxy has the can tell us what is the right way, right? Although the meaning of orthodoxy, right? Orthopractice is the right way. It's only their interpretation of the right way, and there are many different ways of interpreting of living Judaism.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree, and I think that it is interesting how Judaism um, became not a missionary religion as a defense mechanism in the time, and I think that it is truly important for understanding Judaism more to understand why it is that way. The Ben-Gurion University is located in the middle of the desert. How many students and scholars are at the Ben-Gurion University, and what can the head of the Ben-Gurion University be proud of today?
Okay, so as you said, Ben-Gurion University is in Beersheba. Okay, our main campus is in Beersheba, but we have two other campuses. One in Sde Boker, which is where David Ben-Gurion, our namesake, is lived and is at the end of his life and is buried. And we have another campus in Elat. Okay. So when you go to Eilat next time, you can go and visit not just Sun and Sea, but you can also go to the university, a small university campus there. We have 20,000 students, okay, in all three campuses, and almost 900 full-time professors at the university in a broad range of disciplines. We're a comprehensive university, and we teach and research in almost all the disciplines that you'll find in other research intense universities. So the university is almost 60 years old, right? And has I've been there now almost 30 years, right? And I've seen the university grow, and it's really an incredibly vibrant and exciting place to be, and students love it. Students love it. We have a great campus life. But a year and a bit after the 7th of October 2023, and the university, of course, being the closest to the Gaza Strip, right? And we had, we've been under rocket fire for over 16 years on and off. But of course, it was very, very intense after the 7th of October, of course, for not just for us, for everyone. But so since then, we've had over 7,000 students doing reserve military duty. And if I'm proud of anything, right? I'm proud of the fact that we were able to find the right balance to allow them to both defend our country and continue with their academic studies. We did many, many things to help them make up the materials they missed without degrading their degree. In other words, it was very important for us, right, that the degree that they get, right, is one that they can be proud of and they can go out into the job market or continue to advance degrees and research, right? And somehow, miraculously, right, maybe with God's help, I don't know, right, we were able to find the right balance, which allowed them to keep up with their studies, even though the situation has been pretty horrific.
Definitely, and I think that it is truly inspiring what you are doing and the whole university staff is doing, and I think that's just great and amazing. In many universities around the world, for example in the US, not always peaceful protests have recently taken place on the university campuses, where both students and faculty participated. How is it possible, since the goals of academic science and political struggle, as well as the methods, are totally different?
Well, this brings us to the question of what a university is for. Okay, now a university, right, in my opinion, right, is a place where you come to study. Okay, you come to get an education. You come to increase your knowledge, but also a place where you come to meet people who are like you and unlike you. You come to think about and explore your identity. Okay, and hopefully ask difficult questions that you either find answers to in the classroom or perhaps on campus in the cafeteria, speaking to people from different disciplines. I think it's important many of our leaders, future leaders, right, both in the past and in the future, come from the universities. Okay, in other words, the universities are the time where they try out, right, or explore, question, and discover their political orientation and identities. And I think it's very, very important that the university is a safe space where you can explore these things as well. So, did I like the fact that there were demonstrations on campuses in the United States against Israel? No. Okay. Do I think it's illegitimate? No. Okay. Do I think that sometimes they push the freedom of speech far too much? Yes. Okay. Do I think that university administrators should have been more on the ball, right, in the United States? Yes. Would I allow demonstrations on against the war on campus here in Israel? Yes. Okay. But would I make sure that that the boundaries of free speech weren't crossed? Yes. Okay, so I think that again, it's an issue of balance, but I think the universities would be all the poorer, right, if these discussions weren't happening, right, on campuses, and I think it's part of the university education.
That is personally interesting to me. I don't, th and I think to our viewers it will be too, because I think that The issue of protesting university is far more complicated than we think, and that overall, as you already said, it is a place for discussion, and it is a discussion, and I think that if it remains a discussion, it is ultimately a good thing. In 2013, you set up the Center for the Study of Conversion and Interreligious Encounters at Ben-Gurion University. And in one interview, you said, conversion especially interests me, not the act itself, but its ramifications, how it creates the transfer of knowledge and ideas and affects the individual, the family, the community. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, that's the idea to set up the center was because of my and some of my colleagues' interests in how ideas move between religious traditions and what happens to them. And okay, now conversion, think about it, right? When a person converts, people convert for all sorts of reasons. Okay, sadly, over the ages, many of the conversions have been forced. Okay, particularly from Judaism to Christianity, but not only. Okay, but people convert for other reasons, love, in order to escape legal ramifications, legal proceedings, out of conviction, right? They have a religious encounter with God, and suddenly they discover that that perhaps they weren't in, that they discover God in a different way than they previously thought. So there are many reasons to convert. The act of conversion itself is not really interesting. Okay, you get baptized, I don't know, you have a brit milah, you have a circumcision, you go to the mikveh, whatever, right? You say you accept the shahada, right? Or you say right, you witness that Muhammad is Allah's messenger, right? And you whatever. That it's in itself is not interesting. What is interesting is what happens when a convert moves from his or her right prior religion to the new religion, because you never the convert doesn't suddenly forget everything, right, that he or she knew before, right, when they move to their new religion. They have to, right, when they move to the new religion, they take all their prior knowledge, and then they have to negotiate, right? Or try and work out how that all fits into their new religious framework. And that's where the exchange of ideas is fascinating. Okay, because if we're talking about in all senses, and has ramifications on on legal materials, literature, mystical texts, philosophy, right, and religious philosophy, polemics, right? Because very often converts become the most extreme anti to their previous faith for many reasons. One, they want to show that their allegiance to their new faith, that they're true. For example, they're a true Christian, right? They're not a Jew disguised as a Christian. So they try to show, right, what the devout Christian they are by persecuting their previous co-religionists. But often, right, it's a fascinating place for a historian and for others who study religion to see, right, what happens in at those junctures, right, where these people meet, what their ideas, how they formulate their ideas, how they understand their previous religion, how they understand their new religion in light of their old religion, what new ideas they bring into their new religion from their old religion. Fascinating.
I totally agree. I do think also that it is fascinating and how ideas of different religions correlate in the idea of conversion, and I think it is truly interesting. And not far from Ben-Gurion University that you lead, there is Abraham's well, described in the book of Genesis. According to the Torah, it was there that the first peace agreement was signed between Abraham and the king Abimelech. The contract became a symbolic bridge connecting different people and different cultures. For the first time in the scripture, the words, "As I have done well to you, so will you do to me," were heard. Later, Hillel formulated the golden rule of Judaism, do not do to your neighbor what is hateful to you. What principles do you think interfaith, interethnic, intercultural dialogue should be based on? Or maybe it will be helpful for mutual understanding and peacemaking if academic historians would take part in it.
So, by the way, the verse that you cited, right, from Genesis, who said it? It wasn't said by Abraham. It was said by Avimelech.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not Abraham who says it, right? It's Avimelech. Okay, so there again, you have right. So from in the way we look at things, right, we think all good ideas originate from within the Abrahamic tradition. Here you have right Avimelech, who's not right part of that supposed tradition, actually creating that golden rule that afterwards is, as you said, right, is cited by Hillel, right, or Hillel says. So I think the basis for any interreligious dialogue is doubt. Okay? If you are certain, if you are 100% certain your belief is the true one, there's no room for interreligious dialogue. Okay, if you are 100%, if you believe 100% that you know the truth, then there's no room for other truths. Okay, there's only room for other truths when there's doubt. And I think any true believer, okay, who's not a fanatic, has doubt. And if they have doubt, then there's room for interfaith dialogue and discussion. And through that dialogue and discussion, very often one can become even stronger in their own in one's own spiritual tradition, while recognizing that there might be other paths, right, to truth, right, or to God. If you are, and I've taken part in over the years, I've taken part in many interfaith dialogues. Right, I used to go every year to for many years. I used to go every year to a place in Germany. I've now forgotten the name of the place, but where Jews, Christians, and Muslims came together for a week of discussions, and it was lovely. It was amazing. The atmosphere there was incredible, but we were always talking to the convinced. In other words, the people who were there were the people who wanted to be there, right? The people who were already understood, right, that interfaith dialogue was important and religious tolerance was important. We weren't actually talking to those mm, who didn't want to be in that, who don't want to be in that space. And I think for people who don't want to be in that space, it's very, very difficult to talk about religious tolerance, right? To entertain doubt, to be able to move in a space where there is uncertainty. Okay? And so, interfaith, I don't think it matters whether you're an academic or whether you're a practitioner or imam or rabbi, right? I think the greatest theologians in all traditions, in all three traditions, had doubts. If they didn't have doubts, they wouldn't be right? They wouldn't be great theologians. And doubt is the place that allows interfaith dialogue. Okay, where there's doubt, you can have interfaith dialogue and right religious tolerance. Where there's no doubt, there's no tolerance.
I do think, thank you for that answer, and I do think that interfaith dialogue is really, really important. And I think that we should somehow think and discuss how we can get more people to be open for that discussion. Chaim, I want to thank you for your time and great opportunity to learn from you. Toda rabah.
תודה רבה לך. Thank you so much to you, Daniel, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for those incredibly penetrating questions.
Thank you so much. Dear friends, thank you for watching my channel. That means that the role of religion, it is as important to me as it is to you. Please react to the podcast, like, all repost, all reactions are very welcome. See you soon on the podcast, Keeping the Faith.